All right, guys, this is Nova Central coming back at you on another YouTube video. And man, I really do appreciate all the love and support so far. We're having a daily grind of YouTube videos so far. In fall camp, we are strictly in the middle of everything at this point. And Florida State is now 2 weeks away from the season opener. Nole Nation, man, how are you feeling about the season? Let us know how you feel, man.
I'm feeling really, really good. I think we've got a lot of pieces for a good 2026 season.
Yeah, and as always, I'm going to put your description for your social media accounts at the bottom. And I think it's going to be really great. We're going to have a lot of great content as we go through and record a lot of these videos. But today I kind of wanted to talk about something because fall camp we're in kind of the thick of it at this point. We've been through a couple weeks, been through a couple of scrimmages, and our perspectives that we've had about this team as it relates to the very beginning of Paul Camp till now have been completely different. And I kind of want to talk about a couple of players that we think have really elevated themselves either up the depth chart or really surprised us to where we thought maybe, oh, this guy might be a third or fourth string, and now they might be the primary backup. I'll start with my first guy that I think can be efficient and can be that guy, and that's Usman Chroma. I understand, I get it. He's one of the more talented running backs in this rotation. The thing about it is, everyone was so worried about the running back by committee last year. It seemed like you were playing musical chairs with the running backs. But now this year, you had a Sam Singleton, you had a Trey Wisner, and then you even have an Amari Thomas who's a youngster, and then Jamari Sands as well. I just think there was a lot of running backs in that room, and you had a Cam Martin who's coming in to coach the running back group, and you really didn't know what to expect. David Johnson went to another school, and I wanted to see Florida State get back to that rushing attack again. With Mike Norvell calling the plays, he likes to run the football and being able to set up that quick passing game, and also setting throws downfield for Ashton Daniels. I think that Chroma has really set himself apart. I know that On3 have made a report recently that Chroma has been a workhorse for Florida State, and he's kind of signified himself as a starter. Obviously, you're going to have Sam Singleton as your kind of speedy guy that you're going to need to have in this rotation. But I wonder, with Chroma's emergence, how that's going to factor into a guy like Trey Wisner, who's had such a productivity at Texas like he has in the past. But man, Chroma has really impressed me, and I'm super excited to see what this running back rotation is all about.
Absolutely. Chroma is going to be Ashton Daniels' right hand man in a lot of these situations. It kind of seems like um, I'm really excited to see what he can do.
Oh yeah, and I'm kind of nervous. Like I said, it's a risk to be taken for a guy that's only had about 10 carries in 2 games of 12 last year. So you're taking a little bit of a risk, but I do think he's more of a safer pick on offense. Now, gosh, it scares me to say that, but I think he's got the talent. We battled away Auburn and Georgia for him in the recruiting cycle, and I cannot wait to this finally to take place of a guy they invested so much time in. But who's your first pick?
I'm going to go with a fan base favorite, Malachi Marshall.
Okay.
You really you didn't know what you were getting into when you
Mhm.
had this JUCO guy come in, former JUCO national champion, come in. He kind of enrolled late. He enrolled late into the summertime. Uh, Now he's battling for quarterback position number two with Kevin Sperry. So I think he's been one of the guys that has been really putting in the work the offseason. And I definitely think that he is emerging as as quarterback number two this year behind Ashton Daniels.
I couldn't tell you how many times I've went on my comments section for a Malachi Marshall post. And if you haven't followed me already, it's Norvell Central on Instagram. I've had a lot of people talk about how Malachi Marshall is almost the glorified starter. They've listed him as just the next coming of Jameis Winston almost, the way they talk about him so much. And he is a very talented kid. Don't get me wrong. I understand why Florida State fans are a little bit more upset because they named Ashton Daniels a starter before really fall camp even got started. So you couldn't even really get Malachi Marshall into the building before you already named Ashton Daniels the starter. I understand completely why they did it. And I also think, too, he needs to grow in his frame because I do think it's a little bit smaller and he needs to develop. Obviously, you have the 5 for 5 year, so I mean, it's not going to matter as much.
You could definitely put on a little bit more weight on him too.
Yeah. It's weird to me because I mean, you have a Kevin Sperry who's a redshirt freshman, and he's kind of had his inconsistencies, as the staff has already said before. But Malachi Marshall has consistently just been able to be a key in this offense. And man, it's just crazy how things go. I don't really know how they're going to factor in Malachi Marshall later on in the year. Like, is he going to be the first quarterback coming off the bench? What happens? We don't ever want to expect an injury from, an Ashton Daniels, and we want to make sure everyone's healthy for the season. But you always got to have a backup quarterback in case something does happen. I just think that Malachi Marshall, like you said, has been a national champion. He's been having a lot of experience. He's a talented kid that a lot of people really, really like. But I just wonder, how everything's going to factor in. And I think Malachi Marshall has all the tools, has all the skill sets. And man, I would be excited to see him as a backup quarterback. Nothing taken away from Kevin Sperry, obviously, but man, this could be really special for him.
Absolutely.
So I'll go with my next pick. I'm going to go with Jason Lopez, another guy, a phenom who you talked about in a previous video. True freshman, has been making these one-handed catches in practice, just crazy stuff going on. And I think that Florida State fans really noticed the fact that he has really taken the next step. Obviously, with Devin Carter, he's been in a green jersey, a little bit more banged up, but he's going to get back into the swing of things pretty soon. But I think with Jason Lopez, he's been that guy that even Mike Norvell talked about it before. He's not been like a freshman. I can't even refer to him as a freshman, is what he was saying. Like he basically views him as an upperclassman. That's how much seriousness he takes his game, and why you could say it's great, and not really great to take after a true freshman because him being so young. He had 1,000 yards in each of his last 4 seasons at Chaminade. And I think that's a kid that you have to really enjoy because even in his eighth grade year, playing against high schoolers and even 12th and 11th graders, he still put up 600 yards. I mean, as an eighth grader, a 14-year-old, I mean, that is crazy. And I think that he's not the biggest guy, he's not the fastest guy, but he really, really, really relies on his hands. And I think that's why you're going to probably be able to see him as being a starting punt returner. And I think even if he's a starting punt returner and he splits reps with Boggs and Carter, man, I still think he's going to have a huge year, whether that be, 300, 400 yards, maybe a couple of touchdowns, and then he gets a couple quality punt returns. That could be vital to what Florida State does for this season and can open up the door for a guy like Deuce Robinson and Makai Danzy.
Absolutely. I think it's pretty indicative. Like if Boggs stays healthy, you
Mhm.
may see a little bit more Boggs, but
Yeah.
Car or Lopez is going to be right in that mix. I mean, I really just don't see, even if Boggs stays healthy all year, that they're just going to completely throw Carter and Lopez on the sidelines and keep them there. Like I definitely think that those are both guys that are going to be in the mix 100%.
Yeah, I always worry, and I know fans worry about this too, is like last year you had so much hype with Boggs, and then you've had true freshmen with Hakeem Williams and Vandrevius Jacobs, and none of those true freshmen really developed like you thought it would. And a lot of fans are like, well, Norvell only develops transfers, and we've seen this before, and not high school recruits. This is a big opportunity for him to be able to really tell that and prove the doubters wrong. I think that could be a huge thing for him going forward this season. And if he wants to stay in Tallahassee, I think that could really prove for him for the years coming up later after that. But who's your next pick?
I'm going to go with JUCO defensive end Jalen Anderson. I know you just did a video talking about him.
Hmm.
I've kind of talked about him a little bit more
Yeah.
than what I normally do, but I do think that he's going to be a very vital piece. I'm
Mhm.
not necessarily saying he's going to be out there with your Mandrell Desir and your Rylan Kennedy, but he's going to be a guy that on that edge spot, he can get to that quarterback.
Hmm.
Uh, you've heard a lot of hype around him, more so here recently
Hmm.
than you know the than the summer.
Hmm.
Um, you've heard a little bit more. It seems like the coaching staff is really starting to kind of really like where he's at,
Yeah.
which is very very positive to see. Um, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like Jalen Anderson a lot. I know that Nick Williams had talked about it before with the jack position. Him and Rylan Kennedy were battling each other. And I think with that, it kind of scares me a little bit more that Rylan Kennedy is still behind Jalen Anderson. And I just don't really know. I just figured that Jalen Anderson, when he was in JUCO, he had like 7 sacks. He was a very productive guy, had over 40 tackles, 11 tackles for loss. This is a very productive guy that had to take a harder route, had to take a more difficult route. But the good news is that Coach Williams had talked about before is that both Rylan Kennedy and Jalen Anderson, they stick to that hard coaching. They want hard coaching. They want to be great. They want to be better. And Florida State's defensive ends, let's face it, last year were not good. I mean, yes, you had your
Williams.
Desir twins, you had some key pieces there. You also had, Daryl Jackson up in the middle, but it was like you had James Williams that was there. They didn't really do much. You had Jason Jenkins that was there. You had Diamante Diggs that got hurt after 3 games. I mean, I just wondered how everything was going to factor into it. And if you have a Jalen Anderson that's productive, man, that would be great for Florida State in production.
Absolutely. Again, I want to, he's not going to be, he could have a
Mm,
Mandrill Desir kind of breakout. I
yeah.
don't think anybody's really expecting that, but he definitely could be a guy that kind of is like a guy to watch this season.
Yeah, and I want to address something too because Florida State's defense had 31 sacks last year, which is pretty good for 12 games. Problem is, they didn't have a whole lot of sacks. I think they had like 18 or 19 sacks off of just their defensive line, which is not good through 12 games. They only had Mandrell Desir that had 6.5 sacks, and then the next leading sack getter was Ashton Barker. I mean, at 3.5. So you want to see more guys being able to step up. And while it may not seem like a lot with Jalen Anderson having 3.5 or 4 sacks this year, that could be key for a collective effort for a Florida State defense. I'm not saying any of these guys are going to get to 10 sacks. I don't even know if Mandrell Desir can do that, just because I think simply they're going to be double teaming him a lot. And with the Rylan Kennedy, he's got a little bit more of a reserve. He was a reserve at Texas A&M. So, you just factor in all that. Is he going to be able to have that workload that he had before? I just don't know.
But if they're, like you just said, if they're double teaming Mandrill,
Yep.
that door opens for Daryl Desir,
Yep.
another guy that they've
Hmm.
been talking about, and
Hmm.
maybe a Jalen Anderson.
Yep. I agree. I kind of want to go with my last pick here, and this is talking about the second level of the defense, talking about the linebackers. Linebackers have been a sore subject for Florida State fans. And if you have not seen Tatum Bethune's sack last night against Will Levis in a preseason game, my gosh, he absolutely just obliterated the running back in run support. And man, I wish I still had him in Tallahassee. I wish he was still in the Garnet and Gold. But great guy for 2 years. Had I think 154 total tackles in 2 years. Very productive for Florida State's defense, and that's probably the last time you've really seen a Florida State linebacker really doing tremendous things. Not taken away from like Elijah Herring. I think he was a very talented kid that just kind of got some bad luck there. Stephon Thompson was another guy who they really were high on, but just never really panned out. But I do think this guy that I'm about to talk about, Chris Jones is obviously the heat-seeking missile. We understand who he is. He was very productive last year at Southern Miss with 135 total tackles. But Caleb Valley is a guy that I really am excited about. I get it. Everyone was talking about Makai Gaber was a guy that could be coming in and starting at linebacker. Then you had Omar Graham and Blake Nicholson. You had a lot of guys there that you thought could be in the rotation. But I mean, here it is. Caleb Valley is finally healthy from that foot injury. We talked last year, and I remember we had a conversation where he was talking about, he couldn't ever get his foot healthy. He couldn't ever get healthy at all. And it was like, it was so frustrating for him because he played one game on special teams, and the next thing you know, his foot got hurt again. That's a very frustrating thing for a guy that's so aggressive. And you talk about that last year or the year before last when he had that first start in the Fenway Bowl, or I think it was Fenway Bowl. I think it was against UConn. It was his first start. He had 9 tackles in that game. He was all over the field. And I just think that that was a guy that you really want to have in your defense. He's lining up across the field, being able to do that. Obviously, you want someone to cover in space and being able to cover out in the field in case if a tight end or running back goes out in the flat, aka the Pittsburgh game with Desmond Reed. We don't want to have no more of those situations. You don't want to have him going out in a wheel route and not being able to cover anybody. So you want to have being able to fill up run support. You don't want another Jaden Boss situation, but you also need to make sure you're at least capable enough to guarding somebody downfield. And I think that could be a really good get for Florida State. If they're able to get 2 solid linebackers, and then you're able to kind of get those veterans to fight out for the third spot in that 3-3-5 role, I think can be a really big factor what Florida State does this season.
Absolutely. There's a lot of names in that linebacker room. You've got, Lavallee, you've got Omar Graham,
Mhm.
who, you expected to hear a little bit more
Yeah.
from him.
Hmm.
You really haven't. Uh, Chris Jones has been the ultimate guy that they've talked about.
Yeah.
But I like your pick there.
Yeah. Who's your last pick?
I had a change of heart. I'm going
Okay.
with Devin Carter,
Okay.
another
Gotcha.
guy that I believe, like going into the summer, he was the guy that they were raving about, and they
Yes.
still are.
Yes.
I know that he's been pretty banged up,
Mhm.
but definitely a guy I could see still, in that receiving rotation, like I said, with
Mhm.
Boggs and Lopez, and definitely a guy that's going to be an impact kind of guy. I'm
Yeah.
not saying he's going to be the next Deuce Robinson, but he's going to be a guy that you can really rely on as a freshman.
Yeah, I will say this. Dexter Carter is his father, and he used to play at Florida State. Great guy, great representation and ambassador for Florida State. Really is proud of his son. He always talks about it all the time where he wanted to make sure that Devin's recruitment is Devin's recruitment. Whether he went to Auburn in the recruiting cycle and committed over there and signed, or whether he came to Florida State, he wanted to make that decision on his own, with that. And I know Devin is a great guy. He came because I know his relationship with Mike Norvell is very strong. His ties with Florida State's very strong. He knows the program ins and outs because his dad had played there. And I understand sometimes you have to kind of go through those growing pains as a true freshman, and you know that Jason Lopez has been a guy that's been great for Florida State. I'll even add another guy like Tayshawn Gelsey, who they're super high on too. There's a lot of receivers in that room, but as I talked about before, when you have that much talent in your wide receiver room, and you can be able to kind of put in guys to have those better skill sets, you know, Devin Carter is a guy where he separates himself very easily. He's able to go and high point the football at a high level, and that's exactly what Florida State needs. He talked about it previously. I think Mike Norvell, this was one of the first fall camp practices, but Ashton Daniels unloaded a deep pass to Devin Carter, basically spread out the defense and was able to get that long ball that Florida State desperately missed last year. You want to see more like that. Not against Texas A&M or East Texas A&M or anything like that. Not against Kent State. You want to see against a Clemson, against a Miami, against a Florida, games that you have to have it. I want to even talk about like this. The biggest play in the whole 2025 season was that third down and nine throw to Squirrel White for 40 yards to set up the first touchdown that Florida State was able to get, tie the game up, and the next thing you know, the rest was history. We were able to get that pivotal road win or home win, and I think this is a big thing for Florida State is you have to be able to get the ball downfield. All that running game, averaging 200 yards a game is great rushing the ball. But the problem is if you're not able to spread the defense and the defense just pin their ears back and all you're doing is running the football like an army-based offense, you can't do that. You have to be able to spread the defense, and having a guy like Devin Carter who can stretch the defense at a high level is so great for a team's advantage and what they can do offensively.
Absolutely. Cannot wait to see him in just about 2 weeks against
Yeah.
New Mexico State.
No doubt. I'll go ahead and give one more underrated and kind of honorable mention. Gabe Panikowski was the starting kicker for Florida State, announced. It's probably going to be him more than likely. They've talked about him being the leadoff field goal kicker. They said that he's been good anywhere outside of 45. They really like him anywhere between 45 and 60. And he's been a kind of a guy that didn't really play the last 2 years, which is kind of strange. But he's kind of coming from a weird route, just like a Daniel Hughes was with the starting punter. But I just think this is a guy that Florida State fans have to take advantage of and have to see in person because you saw Jake Weinberg last year. He had a strong leg. And you could say you're going to kick a 60-yard field goal, but where's it going to go? You know, you want to be able to have those points on the scoreboard because you miss a 55-yarder, you're putting your team at the 40-yard, they're putting their team at the 40-yard line. They got 20 yards to go before they can kick their own field goal. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
But I really appreciate you coming on the video today and talking. It's been great to see fall camp coming around the corner. Season's right around the corner, man. And I hope each and every one of you have a great rest of the day. And as always, go Noles.
Who knows?